I knew the moment she raised her glass, everything had changed, because she smiled too wide while speaking about new beginnings and family blessings, even though my chest already felt heavy, like someone had locked the air out of the room entirely. I watched her face carefully while the others laughed loudly around the table, unaware that something bigger was sliding quietly into place beneath all the noise and celebration, like a storm building without wind or warning anywhere outside. For months, I had carried questions alone while she moved through the house with perfect ease, leaving no answers behind. Only explanations that never fit the days and hours recorded silently in my head each night before sleep arrived late again. I kept my hands steady while pouring water into someone's empty glass because movement always hides nerves better than words ever could when suspicion grows too sharp to ignore anymore. The room smelled of roasted chicken and wine, but all I could think about was the envelope folded inside my jacket pocket, carrying dates and documents lined carefully like soldiers waiting for orders at the right moment. I had promised myself silence until proof spoke louder than emotion because anger burns quickly while evidence lasts forever through signatures and witnesses reading things aloud without shaking later. My brother asked about work while dessert plates clattered near the sink, but his voice sounded far away behind the weight of my thoughts, marching slowly toward the moment everyone else believed would stay joyful forever. I looked at her one last time across the candles flickering between us, and wondered if she realized everything already stood balanced on the edge of truth, waiting for nothing except my decision about when to let it fall completely. The night she made the announcement felt longer than any winter I remembered, because every second seemed to stretch around the table like time itself wanted to watch the scene unfold slowly before letting anything move forward again. People clapped their hands and raised glasses while her mother wiped tears from her face, and I sat perfectly still, feeling the weight of all those months pressing hard against my chest where no one could see it. I kept thinking about the dates written carefully inside the envelope folded inside my jacket, because those numbers told a story very different from the one she wanted the family to believe tonight. For months, I had watched her behavior change quietly around the edges of our life, where most people never look long enough to notice anything until it grows too obvious to hide anymore. She stopped asking about my late shifts at work, and she started guarding her phone like it carried state secrets while laughing softly at messages she claimed were only from friends I never seemed to meet anywhere. I remembered all the nights when I returned home early expecting dinner together, but found her already eating alone, saying she was too tired to wait because the day had worn her out completely. At first, I told myself marriages bend without breaking sometimes, especially when money stays tight and schedules pull people apart in ways nobody plans when life first begins together so hopefully. I wanted to believe everything stayed normal even when my stomach told me otherwise, because people build routines like walls to keep out storms they do not want to see coming too soon. But then the letters from the clinic arrived with dates stamped clearly across the top corner, and none of those days matched the nights when I'd been home beside her after work. I carried those letters for weeks, reading them again before sleep and again after coffee each morning until the lines burned themselves into my memory so deeply I could recite every appointment time without looking anymore. Tonight, while everyone cheered and smiled, waiting for my reaction, I decided not to give them anything except the same calm silence I had practiced every single day since opening the first envelope weeks ago. Evidence speaks best when tempers stay quiet because anger makes people sloppy, while proof requires patience before it cuts straight through whatever story someone tries to build on top of its sharp edges later. I passed the potatoes across the table when someone asked and nodded when another relative filled my glass again, because nothing in my face betrayed how close everything already stood to collapsing around her before the evening ended completely. I knew this moment would come eventually because truth always arrives even when people waste months pretending otherwise while thinking silence means ignorance instead of preparing to gather itself carefully before speaking at last. The morning after the announcement, I woke earlier than usual because sleep refused to stay long enough to quiet everything spinning through my head since the moment she lifted her glass with that wide smile across her face. I made coffee slowly while the house stayed silent except for the sound of the refrigerator humming behind me like it had something to say, but refused to find the words needed to speak them aloud. She was still asleep upstairs while I sat at the kitchen table spreading the letters across the wood surface one by one. Like cards dealt carefully during a game nobody else even realized we were playing yet. Each letter carried the same clinic stamp in the corner with appointment dates circling back months earlier than anything she claimed during her speech last night, when everyone clapped their hands like nothing could ever stain this celebration. Waiting around us, I read every line again, even though I already knew each word by memory, because routine keeps emotions steady when facts demand attention louder than feelings want to allow anywhere inside the room. The dates stood like fence posts, holding the whole story in place no matter how many excuses she might try building later. Once people started asking questions, she could no longer escape with practiced smiles alone. I drank the coffee cold because my mind stayed busy arranging timelines across pages, proving where I'd been on every single day the calendar claimed mattered most. Before last night changed everything completely. Work schedules, fuel receipts, hotel confirmations, and gate logs from job sites already lined themselves like soldiers waiting inside a folder because preparation moves faster than panic once trust finally breaks for the last time ever. I thought about how calm she looked, sitting there smiling at relatives while serving cake like the entire world rested safely inside her hands, instead of slipping slowly through her fingers one document at a time behind the scenes. People believe noise hides the truth, but silence carries weight longer than anyone expects. Once evidence begins speaking slowly through dates, signatures, and witnesses who remember details, nobody thought important until the moment everything turns upside down without warning. I folded the letters carefully back into the envelope before sliding it into my briefcase because there was no reason to rush something already moving toward an ending written clearly enough for lawyers to follow without questions later. She came downstairs asking about breakfast while I answered politely enough to keep peace floating between us, even though I already felt the distance stretching wider with every step she took across the floor toward the table. I decided not to mention the letters yet because silence allows truth to grow heavier until people feel it pressing down against their shoulders harder than anger ever could alone. By the end of that week, I had gathered everything together into one folder because scattered papers feel like guesses, while organized evidence begins to look like truth prepared to walk into any room without fear anymore. I spent evenings matching her clinic dates against my travel records because I wanted timelines built so tightly, no explanation could slip through the spaces between days or hours later. Each hotel receipt showed where I slept during work trips while her appointments happened hundreds of miles away under fluorescent lights, carrying signatures I never saw until envelopes began arriving unexpectedly in our mailbox. I added text message logs showing my calls unanswered during those afternoons when she claimed the phone had simply died or stayed on silent while she rested at home alone. Bank statements revealed charges from restaurants we had never visited together appearing on evenings she swore she stayed home watching television waiting for me to return late from overtime. I printed fuel card transactions proving how far I drove each day while she built stories about feeling lonely inside the house I kept paying for, with hours traded away from my own life piece by piece slowly. The folder grew heavier each night until it felt like I carried more than paper inside because every page stacked quietly on top of the next one sounded louder than any argument we had ever shared before this moment began unfolding. I stayed polite through dinner, saying little whenever she asked about my day because calm words hide storms better than shouting ever could when someone still believes they control the weather completely. She smiled across the table, telling me her mother wanted us to visit again soon since everyone felt so happy after the big announcement last weekend filled the room with toasts and congratulations. I nodded slowly while thinking about how easily celebrations vanish once facts arrive, carrying dates underlined by pens across copies nobody can erase no matter how many excuses appear afterward. People like to believe memories bend to feelings, but documents keep their shape forever, especially when signed by strangers who have no reason to protect anyone's pride later. I stored digital backups on a small drive hidden inside my desk drawer because lawyers prefer organized clients bringing clean timelines instead of messy suspicions scattered across random conversations difficult to track clearly afterward. Each night before sleeping, I flipped through the folder one more time until my eyes closed, knowing nothing about tomorrow could change the dates already written plainly enough for courts to read aloud without hesitation someday. I felt strangely calm building this record piece by piece because proof removes fear once preparation finishes, replacing confusion with a quiet plan waiting patiently for the right moment to arrive soon. 2 weeks after the announcement, I visited my attorney because carrying suspicion alone eventually becomes heavier than any folder no matter how neatly the pages stay stacked inside. I explained everything slowly while she listened carefully without interrupting, because professionals know facts must arrive clearly before advice can move forward confidently without wasting energy anywhere. She studied the travel records, the clinic letters, the receipts, and the call logs before leaning back silently like someone arranging puzzle pieces already fitting together tighter than anyone expected so soon. She said paternity testing could be ordered legally through standard procedures once preliminary documentation supported a formal request carrying dates, aligning questions with medical timelines correctly enough for courts to approve quickly. Afterward, She recommended financial precautions too, because property divisions grow complicated when emotions rise faster than evidence moves through predictable channels designed for fairness instead of revenge. People later regret chasing endlessly. I signed paperwork freezing one joint account temporarily because savings vanish quickly whenever conflict escalates. Before agreements settle everything clearly under written instructions. Nobody can twist later for personal advantage unfairly. My attorney promised confidentiality while contacting the clinic directly, since medical records require formal releases before anyone outside gains access lawfully without risking challenges during hearings eventually arriving if settlement talks collapse entirely. She scheduled a private investigator as well, because independent witnesses carry more weight than spouses accusing each other emotionally without third parties confirming timelines beyond reasonable doubt convincingly. I handed over my small drive containing scanned copies alongside the original folder because she wanted duplicates stored safely somewhere secure beyond my house in case anything disappeared unexpectedly later. Leaving her office felt lighter than I expected, because sharing responsibility turns private storms into legal processes marching forward under rules, protecting both truth and dignity equally until decisions arrive formally signed by judges. Afterward, at home, she asked about my day while setting the table for dinner like nothing unusual moved quietly beneath our roof, carrying plans neither of us mentioned openly yet. I told her work stayed busy while my mind measured every word carefully across neutral ground, because anger destroys strategy whenever facts require patience instead of noise rushing toward endings prematurely. She smiled faintly, asking about the weekend, while I nodded politely, knowing my attorney already drafted letters beginning timelines. Nobody at that table understood yet, but everyone would read eventually without escaping consequences attached firmly to dates. After dishes, I returned to my desk, adding today's meeting summary into the folder, now resting inside a locked drawer because preparation demands order before storms reach public rooms, carrying decisions nobody controls anymore once courts begin. Speaking through judgments instead of conversations filled with guesses earlier. The investigator delivered his first report the following Thursday evening, while rain tapped steadily against my office window like someone knocking gently before entering, carrying news I already expected deep down inside quietly. He documented photographs of vehicles parked outside the clinic during appointments, confirmed through time-stamped security footage, aligning perfectly with receipts listing charges from nearby restaurants afterward. License plates traced back to addresses unfamiliar to me, but connected through insurance records to a man whose name appeared more than once inside her recent phone history logs. The investigator included witness statements from neighbors recalling his visits during afternoons when she told me errands kept her busy around town running chores, apparently lasting several hours longer than necessary. Each page stacked carefully into the folder, growing thicker until timelines stretched clearly across weeks, proving patterns nobody could explain away once evidence walked confidently into any courtroom demanding attention loudly. My attorney reviewed everything Friday morning, saying the chain now reached far enough for paternity testing requests, carrying judicial approval behind them because courts dislike ordering such measures lightly without foundation built thoroughly. Beforehand, she prepared documents listing travel records, appointment schedules, financial withdrawals, phone logs, and investigator findings under one petition, leaving no room for delays caused by procedural challenges opponents often raise automatically. I signed calmly because signatures weigh less heavily than secrets carried silently through dinners where relatives laugh loudly, never guessing storms wait patiently outside windows, already shaking slightly from distant thunder approaching. Over the weekend, she planned another family visit, inviting her parents again, believing appearances hide fractures spreading quietly beneath foundations everyone assumes remain solid until cracks widen too far suddenly. I agreed politely while arranging additional copies of evidence stored securely across multiple drives, including one locked inside my desk drawer beneath tax files. Nobody opens casually before spring arrives yearly. Monday morning, my attorney filed motions requesting court dates faster than usual, because judges prioritize cases carrying potential financial implications, involving marital estates facing disputed claims, possibly affecting inheritance distributions. Later that afternoon, I stopped at the bank, confirming account freezes extended legally through preliminary injunctions, preventing asset transfers without mutual consent until proceedings finish, regardless of settlement offers appearing eventually. She asked why statements arrived showing restrictions across savings. While I explained calmly, both parties remain protected equally through standard precautions, ensuring fairness independent from emotions coloring conversations unpredictably. Sometimes, she nodded slowly, perhaps sensing storms building somewhere beyond sight, yet close enough to hear faint thunder rolling quietly toward this house, where silence stretched longer after dinner ended Monday night. Upstairs, she closed the bedroom door early, claiming exhaustion while I organized receipts across the kitchen table under bright lights, leaving no corner empty of facts waiting patiently inside folders carrying tomorrow toward judges reading dates, louder than voices trembling afterward. 2 weeks later, the court approved our petition for testing because documentation stacked carefully across timelines convinced the judge everything warranted formal examination under standard procedures protecting both sides equally until results arrived clearly enough for decisions afterward. Oh, my attorney arranged appointments through accredited laboratories, maintaining strict chain of custody protocols, preventing later challenges claiming irregularities. Invalidated findings judges require handled properly throughout every step completely. She sent certified letters informing her counsel about scheduled dates, giving them opportunity responding appropriately before deadlines passed automatically, without delaying court calendars already assigning hearing slots farther along winter. Sessions quickly approaching. Meanwhile, the investigator kept observing patterns around town, recording additional meetings between her and the same man appearing previously across photographs. Timestamps, bank withdrawals, restaurant receipts, and cell tower records aligning, repeatedly across weeks unmistakably. He captured images showing them entering a furniture store together one afternoon, carrying brochures outward afterward, while smiling toward cameras unknowingly documenting activities, contradicting explanations offered whenever relatives asked casual questions about weekends apparently spent visiting her parents instead. My attorney said nothing publicly because silence preserves advantage, while paperwork travels quietly through systems building momentum heavier than accusations shouted prematurely before facts reach judges reading calmly later. At home, she behaved carefully, cooking dinners, asking about my day, speaking softly as though nothing unusual hovered near our walls, stretching tighter each evening around conversations, never drifting beyond weather, traffic, and work anymore. I answered politely, describing projects, meetings, and deadlines, while my mind stayed busy arranging timelines across folders, witnesses and receipts forming walls surrounding truth, waiting until courts opened doors, admitting everything inside. Officially. One night, her sister called inviting us to celebrate upcoming holidays together, assuming our marriage floated smoothly forward like always before announcements filled rooms with champagne glasses lifted high above secrets nobody expected spilling. Soon afterward, I agreed pleasantly while planning with my attorney privately because public appearances maintain stability until settlements finalize behind closed doors, where signatures replace arguments. Emotions cannot twist after judgments, close records. Permanently. Friday afternoon, laboratory technicians completed first sample collection under observation, while documenting identification, verification, packaging, sealing, and transfer steps carefully across forms requiring signatures, initials, and timestamps. Covering every stage thoroughly. Results would return within 3 weeks, processed independently before delivery directly into court files under seal protecting confidentiality, until hearings allowed disclosures through official orders judges issue routinely afterward. My attorney explained timelines clearly, ensuring expectations stayed realistic, because laboratories follow procedures strictly regardless of urgency clients express when emotions push faster than science permits legally. I listened quietly. Understanding patience builds credibility faster than pressure whenever opponents hope mistakes appear. Discrediting processes requiring precision, accuracy, and transparency under scrutiny, heavier than personal feelings swirling angrily behind closed doors elsewhere. During the weeks waiting for results, everything inside the house felt like furniture balanced on one leg, ready to fall over whenever someone breathed too loudly near corners carrying weight nobody mentioned directly anymore. She moved carefully through rooms, smiling politely during dinners, calling relatives, often telling them we stayed busy with work while avoiding details about court dates, investigators, laboratories, or anything connected to files growing heavier. Downstairs inside my locked drawer, I kept routines steady because predictability keeps suspicion sleeping longer. Giving paperwork time, catching up silently behind curtains drawn tightly across windows, showing nothing outside changing while inside walls shift slowly. My attorney advised patience, explaining how judges prefer parties remaining calm, cooperative, and professional, especially when financial settlements, potential custody matters, and marital property divisions wait silently behind pending test results. Approaching soon, the investigator delivered final updates, confirming continued meetings between her and the same man appearing repeatedly across earlier photographs, restaurant receipts and phone logs showing contact patterns remaining consistent despite reduced frequency after petitions reached courts officially. He documented one afternoon showing them driving toward a neighboring county, checking into a hotel using credit cards linked directly to his name through banking records accessible legally under standard procedures. Investigators follow carefully, avoiding privacy violations jeopardizing admissibility later. All images carried timestamps aligning perfectly with text messages recovered earlier from phone backups, proving communication threads arranging meetings overlapping appointments she told relatives involved volunteer activities elsewhere around town. Completely. My attorney organized findings sequentially preparing exhibits in case hearings required demonstrations, explaining timelines visually through charts, maps, and financial summaries. Judges request frequently whenever evidence grows too complex reading. Linearly alone. I felt no anger opening those reports nightly because clarity replaces rage, once facts arrange themselves neatly enough, speaking louder than any arguments emotions might invent, trying rewriting history afterward unsuccessfully. Meanwhile, she suggested visiting her parents during upcoming weekends, pretending nothing unusual moved underneath conversations, stretching longer pauses whenever marriage, children, or future plans appeared accidentally between relatives discussing. Holidays approaching quickly now. I agreed softly while scheduling additional meetings with accountants reviewing retirement funds, real estate valuations, and insurance policies, since settlements eventually required dividing assets, carefully preventing disputes prolonging proceedings. Unnecessarily after judgments close formally. Each evening, I stored duplicate copies off-site inside a safe deposit box protecting against fire theft or tampering, because redundancy guarantees survival if anything unexpected threatens single locations holding critical records before hearings. Conclude completely. Waiting carried strange calmness across those weeks, like trains approaching from distances still invisible, yet vibrations traveling through rails announce certainty. Nobody doubts once whistles echo faintly across valleys reaching towns preparing. Crossings lowering gates slowly. The results arrived on a Tuesday morning when rain streaked across my windshield like someone drawing lines through the last pieces of doubt still clinging stubbornly to corners of my mind, refusing to leave quietly. My attorney called first, saying the laboratory submitted findings directly under seal to the court ahead of schedule, because processing finished earlier than anticipated due to light caseloads this month. She explained hearings would proceed automatically now since results belonged officially inside records. Neither side could alter afterward, no matter how arguments attempted spinning explanations against evidence reading plainly across pages without hesitation anywhere. I drove toward her office slowly because decisions carry weight heavier than speed demands whenever consequences approach steadily. After months building momentum behind doors nobody opens until everything stands ready together. Inside the conference room, she handed copies across the table face down first, waiting until I confirmed readiness before rotating them upward, showing numbers printed beside terms written clinically without emotion anywhere. The test excluded me, completely eliminating statistical uncertainty altogether, because probability measured zero across alleles courts recognize universally whenever paternity panels answer questions. Science resolves finally without interpretation, required beyond reading lines aloud directly. My attorney nodded, saying petitions now move toward financial settlements, asset divisions, property deeds, and retirement accounts, since custody considerations ended instantly after results reached clerks filing orders. Judges signed quickly afterward. She prepared motions freezing additional joint accounts, preventing withdrawals until valuations conclude through independent auditors assigning fair market prices across holdings before distribution formulas apply, automatically protecting both parties equally afterward. I listened carefully, feeling calm instead of surprised, because preparation replaces shock once evidence builds walls, preventing denial from entering rooms guarded tightly by facts, closing every window firmly. At home, she asked casually about my day while clearing dishes, pretending everything remained ordinary, although envelopes already traveled toward attorneys arranging conferences, scheduling mediation dates judges require before trials proceed, unnecessarily. I answered neutrally because explanations serve no purpose until procedures finish completely, since arguments belong nowhere near kitchens where emotions tempt people saying things, damaging negotiations, needing civility, protecting dignity finally. That evening, I packed personal documents, photographs, clothing, and tools into labeled boxes, moving them quietly into storage units rented last week under my name alone, ensuring separation remains orderly during transitions beginning officially now. She watched silently from the hallway, saying nothing, because silence grows thick once facts settle heavier than accusations ever carried earlier, when people believed noise protects them longer than truth actually allows anywhere. My attorney confirmed mediation hearings start next month, giving both sides opportunity resolving divisions privately before courts finalize judgments enforcing agreements permanently through recorded orders. Clerks maintain publicly afterward. I slept easily for the first time in months, knowing preparation ended finally because evidence replaced suspicion permanently. Once results arrived, closing questions, leaving only resolution standing ahead now. Mediation began 3 weeks later inside a quiet building downtown, where hallways smelled faintly of paper ink and old carpet, carrying echoes of conversations ending, marriages, businesses, and contracts behind closed doors. Strangers passed without glancing at each other anywhere. My attorney sat beside me, flipping through organized binders stacked carefully across the table, while her counsel arrived carrying fewer documents, looking tense already, because preparation shows itself quickly through weight thickness and order. Nobody mistakes afterward. The mediator explained rules, clearly emphasizing confidentiality, respect, and efficiency, because courts expect settlements reached privately whenever possible, avoiding trials consuming calendars packed already with cases judges prefer settling. Earlier, we reviewed financial disclosures, first confirming retirement balances, property valuations, insurance accounts, credit obligations, and tax records. Since everything requires listing transparently before negotiations divide assets, debts, and responsibilities equitably under statutes governing marital estates strictly, my attorney presented independent appraisals for our home vehicles and investments supported by receipt statements and market comparisons, preventing arguments about fairness before distribution formulas applied automatically across categories. Established legally statewide, she proposed transferring the house title solely under my name, offset by liquid assets allocated toward her side, balancing equity evenly once calculations concluded, leaving neither party disadvantaged afterward. Bank accounts frozen earlier, now divided proportionally according to income's contributions and projected needs, because statutes demand mathematical precision, avoiding favoritism sentiments or personal opinions influencing outcomes unfairly anywhere. Retirement plans split through qualified domestic relations orders, ensuring tax penalties avoided entirely, while preserving future growth benefits both parties retain individually after separation finalizes formally later. Debts assigned similarly according to origination usage and responsibility, confirmed through records, emails, and signatures, eliminating disputes about credit cards, loans, and obligations accumulated during years together, disappearing gradually now, through paperwork replacing conversations permanently. She requested spousal support initially, but withdrew demands after my attorney submitted investigator reports documenting undisclosed income sources, connected indirectly through accounts associated with the man appearing repeatedly across photographs, receipts and witness statements collected earlier meticulously. Custody considerations ended quickly since results removed parental standing, legally leaving no jurisdiction. Evaluating schedules, visitation, or child support obligations impossible without biological connection confirmed beforehand conclusively. By afternoon, draft agreements covered every category requiring resolution, except personal property divisions scheduled separately next week, allowing time preparing inventories, photographs, and receipts, proving ownership clearly before exchanges occur. Supervised neutrally, preventing conflicts arising afterward unnecessarily. The mediator summarized progress, noting cooperation remained professional throughout sessions, despite underlying tension visible whenever signatures approached lines committing terms permanently beyond opportunities reopening negotiations again. Later, my attorney advised reviewing drafts calmly over weekend, ensuring accuracy, completeness, and fairness before signing. Deadlines arrive next month. Converting tentative resolutions into binding judgments, courts enforce permanently once approved formally. Afterward, leaving the building felt lighter than expected because months carrying suspicion, anger, and preparation finally moved toward conclusions arriving soon through signatures, paperwork, and recorded orders replacing uncertainty, silence, and waiting. Completely. The following week, I reviewed every draft page carefully alone inside my office where blinds stayed closed, because focus requires quiet spaces, free from interruptions, distractions, or unnecessary conversations drifting through doorways, stealing attention away from details demanding precision completely. My attorney highlighted sections covering property transfers, retirement divisions, account closures, debt assignments, insurance policies, and tax obligations, making sure no clause allowed ambiguity threatening enforcement later once courts approved. Everything formally, she insisted on revisiting language addressing confidentiality, because settlements protect reputations whenever parties avoid public accusations, interviews, or disclosures damaging professional relationships, future employment opportunities, or family ties unnecessarily beyond financial matters ending already. I agreed fully because dignity matters longer than arguments shouted impulsively during endings. People regret afterward wishing silence replaced anger before documents traveled permanently into archives. Nobody reopens later under ordinary circumstances anywhere. Over weekend, I cross-checked valuations against receipts, statements, and appraisals. Verifying calculations produced equitable distributions. Neither side challenges successfully afterward, since fairness prevents appeals, prolonging processes draining resources emotionally, financially, and physically after judgments finalize eventually. Monday morning, we met again with mediator presenting revisions, clarifying deadlines for property exchanges, account transfers, and title recordings scheduled sequentially, preventing confusion, conflicts, or delays undermining closure expected once. Signatures locked terms beyond future disputes completely. Her counsel requested minor changes, adjusting payment timelines, slightly accommodating logistical constraints. Banks require processing large transactions safely across multiple institutions, complying with federal regulations, avoiding penalties, fees, or reporting errors complicating settlements unnecessarily afterward. My attorney accepted modifications since adjustments affected nothing materially regarding balances, totals, percentages, or outcomes remaining intact exactly as negotiated originally, protecting interests, obligations, and rights already established. Thoroughly earlier across sessions carefully, drafts incorporated notary acknowledgments, witness signatures, and filing instructions, ensuring procedural compliance satisfies court clerks reviewing submissions automatically before assigning hearing dates. Judges use approving settlements, converting agreements into binding orders enforceable permanently afterward. We scheduled final conference 2 weeks later, allowing administrative processing completion before presentation hearings, requiring no testimonies, arguments, or evidentiary exhibits, since uncontested resolutions move efficiently through dockets crowded. With trials lacking cooperation, professionalism, or preparation earlier, she avoided conversation during breaks, focusing instead on her phone screen, while I discussed timelines quietly with my attorney, confirming possession dates for house keys, vehicle titles, and storage units transferring sequentially across weekends, minimizing disruptions, delays, or conflicts afterward unnecessarily. Mediator commended professionalism displayed consistently throughout negotiations, despite difficult circumstances surrounding origins, investigations, results, and petitions, introducing proceedings nobody anticipated earlier when announcements, celebrations, and photographs filled rooms appearing ordinary temporarily before documents arrived, slowly replacing illusions completely forever. Leaving session that afternoon carried sense finality approaching soon, because remaining steps, administrative, procedural, and clerical, lacked emotions dominating previous months, consumed by suspicion, discoveries, preparations, and confrontations ending. Finally, once signatures arrive, locking doors permanently behind everything. 2 weeks later, the final conference arrived inside the courthouse, where signatures waited beside folders stacked neatly across tables, polished carefully beneath fluorescent lights. Humming faintly like reminders, nothing escapes records clerk's stamp. Permanently afterward, without hesitation anywhere. My attorney reviewed last revisions, quietly confirming property transfers, account closures, title recordings, retirement divisions, debt assignments, and confidentiality provisions remain intact, unchanged, unchallenged, and enforceable fully once orders. Finalize closing proceedings permanently behind judgments. Nobody reopens again later. Her counsel arrived carrying fewer documents this time because earlier negotiations removed conflicts, replacing arguments, accusations, and delays with procedures, forms, and agreements, settling everything gradually step by step across months spent. Preparing thoroughly, the mediator summarized progress, noting cooperation, professionalism, and patience allowed resolutions, avoiding trials, hearings, or testimonies, sparing expenses. Headlines and uncertainties, families suffer whenever litigation replaces settlements, dragging disputes publicly through calendars crowded already elsewhere. We signed sequentially, beginning with financial accounts, then property deeds, then retirement orders, then debt distributions, Each page notarized, witnessed, and dated properly, protecting enforceability, preventing loopholes, challenges, or reversals, appearing afterward unnecessarily anywhere. Her counsel requested minor scheduling accommodations regarding move-out deadlines and storage retrievals, because logistics require coordination whenever households divide possessions, furniture documents, and personal items across separate locations, minimizing disputes, misunderstandings, or accidental damages afterward. My attorney accepted since extensions affected nothing. Materially regarding valuations, balances, percentages, confidentiality clauses, or payment obligations remaining intact, unaffected and final. Once court clerks approve, submissions converting. Agreements into orders enforceable under statutes permanently. The mediator congratulated both sides, reminding compliance matters equally for preserving dignity, stability, and closure after difficult transitions, concluding formally without bitterness dominating endings already painful enough through discoveries, petitions, and revelations preceding settlements entirely. We submitted signed copies immediately downstairs, where clerks stamped, received across covers assigning hearing dates, automatically processing judgments. Judges approve routinely whenever uncontested agreements meet procedural, statutory, and administrative requirements correctly without delays. Hearings or appearances demanded afterward unnecessarily. Outside, courthouse air felt colder, sharper, cleaner somehow, because weight carried silently through months finally lifted, leaving calendars, tasks, and responsibilities lighter, clearer, calmer, beyond signatures, documents, and settlements, closing chapters. Permanently forever now. At home, I packed remaining belongings labeled carefully stacked, neatly transported sequentially toward house vehicles and accounts, awarded exclusively under orders guaranteeing possession ownership and control, transferring completely without disputes. Interruptions, arguments, or challenges arising afterward again. She moved separately according to schedules, filings, and agreements signed earlier, because processes require precision, fairness, and clarity, replacing conversations, emotions, or improvisations whenever separations involve property, finances, or legal obligations. Judges enforce impartially afterward. My attorney closed files, releasing final invoices, receipts, and instructions, covering record-keeping, tax implications, and deadlines, ensuring compliance, preventing oversights, penalties, or complications appearing months, years, or decades later. Unnecessarily beyond settlements concluded permanently already today. Driving away, I realized silence changed meaning entirely, because months earlier it carried suspicion, then preparation, then evidence afterward, consequences, yet finally closure, resolution, and dignity. Nothing interrupts anywhere anymore now. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching,